All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Wilmette Talk number 3. My name is Michael Blue. I will be your moderator for the evening. We'll do a little bit more introduction as we go along. But just so that everybody knows, tonight is the third in a series of 4 Wilmette Talks that we're doing as part of the village updating its comprehensive plan. I will probably say this more than once, but the project website is what you see before you, readysetwilmette.com. It is the place to see everything that's gone on about the plan, summaries of previous discussions that have happened, video snippets from the 2 previous Wilmette Talks. And so the web is going to be the answer to a lot of your questions, including if you have comments or want to leave some questions here for us. So by way of introducing what we're going to do with the evening, let's go to the next slide, and we'll see our agenda for tonight and let you know that. Are we switching? Kristen, can you advance?
Let's see. It worked just a second ago. You saw it. All right, start with the intros and I'll get going on the fixing this. All right, Michael, there we go. It was just stuck.
Oh, technology.
Technology.
Anyway, what we're going to do tonight is we're going to divide the evening and the presentations into 2 halves. The first part will be about the housing component of the comprehensive plan, and we'll talk too about its twin, if you will, demographics. So it's housing and who's living there and who's in the community. We'll take a little bit of a break, probably sometime around or before 7 o'clock. And then part 2 of the session will be about business and commerce in the community and the sub areas, which are the special districts that are getting a more closer look as part of the planning process. So we'll share that tonight. But before we get started, we are very pleased to have with us Mike Brayman, the village manager for the village of Wilmette, and we're going to invite Mike to share some welcoming comments on behalf of the village. So Mike, we're all yours.
All right, thank you, Michael, and welcome everybody to a Village of Wilmette sponsored discussion on the future of business, commerce, and housing in our community. As Michael said, I'm Mike Brayman and I am the village manager. This is the third in a series of 4 discussions that we're having as part of our comprehensive plan update. Through a comprehensive plan, the village considers issues and opportunities important to the community. It builds on our past and it looks towards our future. The last full comprehensive plan for Wilmette was completed in 2000. And it doesn't seem that long ago, it's 22 years ago, and a lot has changed since then. The village has done a lot of planning since that time on important topics. We've done a village center master plan, an active transportation plan, a sustainability plan, and more. But the comprehensive plan's goal is to tie all of these individual components together. And just because our community is mostly built out doesn't mean there isn't a need for thoughtful, long-range planning to enhance our village. In preparing to conduct this plan and looking for experienced consultants to help us with the effort, we identified a number of specific themes that were important to our community. And those are the focus of this plan. You can find all those themes and more on the project website, which was shared in the chat earlier, readysetwilmette.com. As to the themes for tonight, our first discussion will be about housing. Housing is important because it directly relates to who we are as a community. We're going to see statistics about housing in Wilmette tonight, hear a discussion about current and future housing fits which fit our community goals, share thoughts on housing affordability, and hear what the village has done and can do to create more affordable housing. The second theme tonight will be about business and commerce. The discussion will consider our 4 primary business districts that are a focus of the plan that we are working on right now. Those include Linden Square, the Green Bay Road Corridor, the Village Center, also commonly referred to as our downtown, and the Ridge Road Corridor. We'll talk about the challenges and opportunities those areas represent, the types of businesses suited for the districts, and what may be done to enhance those areas. And then ultimately, the question is, what are we going to do with all the information that we're gathering from these 4 discussions, all the surveys and other information that we're intaking throughout this plan? Ultimately, the plan is going to gather those, consolidate them, and set out implementation steps to work towards the goals that we set out. And building on that, the village board and our boards and commissions will continue their efforts to make Wilmette a place where people want to live, do business, and visit. Now, it's really important that those who are participating or those who are watching after the fact help inform the recommendations and actions that will help make up the final plan. Visit the project website after the discussion, participate in our surveys, and find much more information about our process and our progress, and share your ideas. You can also find summaries and clips of our previous 2 Wilmette Talks and other discussions about the plan's themes. So on behalf of myself, the village board, and all of our staff, we really thank you for taking the time out of your evening to join us and appreciate your time. And with that, I'm going to throw it back to Michael.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate you joining us tonight. Before we go further, I just wanted to reiterate what Francie just put in the chat. We do have time blocked out on our agenda to have questions from those of you that are watching tonight. And so if you go to the Q&A function at the bottom here and type in questions, I don't know that we'll be able to get to all of them depending on how many there are and how the discussion goes, but we will do our best to cover all of that. Let me take a minute and tell you who we are, right? These consultants that are working on all of this. So I'm with Tesca Associates, as is Francie Lawrence, who has helped put together tonight, done a great job to do that. We're the lead firm. We are a city planning and urban design firm. Have been doing that for the better part of 45 years. And so we have history in the area. We're located in Evanston. As Community Development Director Jen Adler and I have talked about, we are both past interns for the Village of Wilmette. So we're thrilled to be here. Tesca is very, very pleased to be leading this effort. We're also very, very pleased to be joined by Goodman Williams Group and Applied Real Estate Analysis area. Goodman Williams Group is one of the region's just absolute leading market analysis firms in terms of understanding what the heck is going on. This is so important so that the recommendations that come through the plan are realistic in terms of business and commerce. It's really easy to wish for things and hope, but it's so important that it be based on the reality of what's going on. And Goodman Williams does that like no one else. So we're so thrilled to have them as part of our team. Also, Applied Real Estate Analysis is just flat out an absolute leader in terms of housing and affordable housing analysis and understanding those issues. And those are, as Mike mentioned, the themes of the plan. Those are two of the major themes that came out. And so we are really thrilled to be joined by these two groups, and they'll be represented on our panel tonight. If we go to the next slide, you'll see who's starting off. There's me again. I'm be your moderator for tonight for both of these discussions. And then Kristen Hayes from Goodman Williams has done a tremendous amount of analysis in terms of the data, the demographics, the market analysis. And we're going to start off right now with Kristen walking us through the analysis as it relates to demographic and housing. So I'm going to hit mute. Kristen, we're all yours.
Sure thing. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kristen Hayes. I'm a project manager at Goodman Williams Group. We've been working very closely with Tesca and our other partners for over a year now, collecting data, analyzing data, speaking with stakeholders, landowners, leasing brokers, developers, shop owners, amongst many other of those who are actively working in and working on Wilmette. So we're happy to finally share with you tonight some of our findings and get some feedback, answer some questions, and spark some conversation. So as Michael mentioned, I'm going to give a quick presentation first on demographics and housing and later on business and commerce. And I have lots of information to cover, and I want to make sure we have plenty of time to speak with our local experts and panelists on these matters. So I will be going through this fairly quickly, but this will be posted on the website after tonight's program. And please feel free to ask questions in the chat box or the ask a question box, and we'll try to get to them in this program. And if we don't get to them, we will try to answer them on the website at a later date. All right, moving on to section 1, we're going to review demographics and employment trends, highlight a few things on the current housing stock in Wilmette, and then end with our initial findings and what we are calling future housing needs in Wilmette. All right, starting off with a few basics, we determined a market area for our analysis. It always helps when we're trying to find trends in one place to compare it to other places nearby. So using a 5-mile radius around Wilmette, we selected the communities that are on your screen right now that are about within a 5-mile radius in the North Shore. Starting with demographic comparisons. First, we're going to look at total population and total households in 2020 from the most recent census information. So Wilmette is highlighted in green, and they are ranked from highest population to lowest. And we see here Wilmette is right in the middle. Some communities have larger populations, some have smaller. The 2020 census counted more than 28,000 people and nearly 10,000 households in Wilmette. Moving one column over to average household size, Wilmette again is highlighted in green, and it's ranked from largest to smallest. Wilmette is on the higher end of the spectrum, but at 2.8 people per household, which indicates to us maybe a high number of school-age children. One column over, median age, ranked here from oldest to youngest. Wilmette again is in that kind of middle category with a median age of 45.5, which has continued to increase over time. I do have a bit more information on age cohorts and how they've changed over time in later slides, so I will dig into that in just a few slides. Not that quickly. All right, median household income. Geez. Wilmette is at the higher end of the spectrum again with nearly $165,000 per year as the median household income. All right, zooming in now to just Wilmette. The green bars are going to show you the total population in 2000, 2010, and 2020. We did see a bit of a loss in Wilmette population between 2000 and 2010. However, they have made up for it between the last 10 years, kind of surpassing the 2000 numbers with a estimated population just over 28,000. The blue bars here represent population forecasts through 2050. These are provided by CMAP, or the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, and they have advanced methods to kind of come up with these forecasts over the next 20, 30 years. So we do see Wilmette growing between now and 2040, and kind of tapering off there at about nearly 33,000. So that could mean, these are forecasts again, that there could be an increase of more than 4,000 people, or nearly 1,600 new households. All right, digging into the age data as promised, starting on the right side of your screen on that graphic. We're going to look at these good-looking stick people. They represent the population kind of broken up into age cohorts in 2020. Starting with the green guys, that's showing you your school-age children age 0 to 19, and there's quite a few of them. Conversely, we go to age 20 to 39 in this orange color, and there is noticeably a huge drop there, especially in that 20 to 29 age cohort. We have a very large cohort here of 40 to 59 in blue, a little less in yellow for that 60 to 79, and then less in 80 to 85 in gray at the bottom. Moving to the left side of your screen, we're gonna look at how this has changed over time. The green bar is showing you 2000, and the blue bar is showing you 2020. So school-age children have remained relatively consistent over the last 20 years, whereas we have seen decreases in age 20 to 34 and 35 to 49, and conversely increases in 50 to 64 and 65 and over. This data comes in handy when we're trying to determine housing needs or demand segments in an area. I want to make everyone aware of the changing age trends in Wilmette, and the planning necessary to either attract or retain the next generation of Wilmette residents. We'll get into this a bit further, but start to think about the different housing needs that each of these age cohorts requires as we continue our conversation. All right, taking a look at employment trends. The slide is a little bit confusing, so bear with me as I go through it. Starting in the top right corner, looking at the total number of jobs in Wilmette in 2019, which is the most recent year that data was available. So in 2019, there were over 7,000 jobs in Wilmette, and there was over 12,715 Wilmette residents that were contributing to the workforce. Focusing your attention now to that middle circle, that represents those who are both living and working in Wilmette. You'll notice that of the over 7,000 jobs in Wilmette, only 815 or 11% are held by residents. Moving your attention to the left side, that 6356 number, that's the number of those who are commuting into Wilmette for work. So the large majority is those coming in from other neighborhoods or other counties. The leading industries in Wilmette at this point are education, retail trade, food services, and healthcare. And just noting here that the census data showed that a majority of the jobs that people hold in Wilmette make $40,000 a year or less. So we're talking about teachers or school faculty or nurses, or maybe those helping out at the grocery store or serving at a local restaurant. And seeing here that a large number of those folks do not potentially make an income that will allow them to live within Wilmette. All right, digging into the housing stock in Wilmette as it is now, starting on the left side at housing age. That gray sliver on top at 8% represents the percentage of homes that have been built since 2000. So that's the smallest piece of the pie there at only 8%, which is kind of representing to us maybe a bit of an aging housing stock, seeing that the majority was built before 1970. Moving to the middle, housing type. The large majority of homes are single family detached. So your typical single family home doesn't share any walls with any other housing units. There's very few single family attached homes, which is your, for example, condos or townhomes. And there is some multifamily in kind of in some older, larger scale apartment buildings within Wilmette. And lastly, moving to the right side of your screen at housing size, which we see a large variety of 3, 4, 5 bedroom homes, but a lot less options for studios, 1 or 2 bedrooms. So as we consider the type of residents that we're looking to attract or retain, these different factors give us indications of where more housing variety is needed. All right, the fun stuff that everyone loves to look at, the housing prices. So the blue bar is showing you the total number of housing units that were sold in a year. And we do see continued growth, especially in 2021 with the very hot housing market that occurred after the pandemic. The orange is showing you the median sale price over time. There is a noticeable dip after the Great Recession, which happened, I think, in every community in the nation at that time. We see a nice recovery, and that number being above pre-recession prices in 2021 at $850,000 as the median sale price. And just noting a fun fact that I found in our 2021 data, of all the houses sold last year, 36% of them were sold for $1 million or more. And everyone likes to see how they stack up next to their neighbors. So just throwing this up here, you can see Wilmette here in the black line with the triangle with a similar median sale price as Northfield, a bit higher than Glenview, Evanston, Skokie, and Morton Grove, but still a bit lower than Kenilworth and neighboring Winnetka. All right, so trying to tie this all together to determine some housing needs that we see in Wilmette. So the left column summarizes the information I just shared with you, and it corresponds to the housing need on the right in the same color. So starting off in green here, Wilmette is expected to grow in population. We know there are shifts occurring with different age cohorts with an aging population and then losses in those 20 to 49. And we see a bit of a lack of housing diversity with mostly larger single family homes. So this ties to the two bullets on the right side, that Wilmette does need more housing units to accommodate the projected population growth, but can be strategic in the type of housing that's delivered that can accommodate multiple demand segments. So we're talking about downsizing empty nesters or seniors who maybe no longer can or want to maintain their 4-bedroom single family home and want to downsize, but want to remain in the village. We're talking about attracting some young professionals or young families or college students, or those who we mentioned that work in Wilmette but don't necessarily can't afford to live in Wilmette, as well as some affordable housing options. This could be fulfilled by delivering a variety of housing types to accommodate the types of households I just listed, which could include some multifamily rental apartment, some for sale townhomes, condos. Of course, there's still needs for luxury apartments or single family homes, just a wide variety of options that can accommodate the types of residents that Wilmette is looking to attract or retain. Back to the left column, looking at the blue bullet points under considerations. Again, highlighting that the majority of those who work in Wilmette cannot necessarily afford to live in the village. And we just saw that the housing prices are fairly high. So housing in Wilmette needs to consider accepting a variety of price points that are more accessible to a wider variety of the population, and also has some considerations to affordable housing to promote inclusivity. Last but not least, we saw the housing stock is a bit older, and just highlighting the need for some updated housing stock with modern features and amenities that still is appropriate for Wilmette and in terms of height and character. All right, before we move on to our panelists to discuss all the stuff I just explained to you, I just want to highlight a couple of things that can help spur the conversation. This is an affordable housing development that was completed in 2021 by the Housing Opportunity Development Corporation. It was 16 units, and it is now currently 100% occupied. Just to demonstrate the demand here, within the first 2 weeks of advertising these 16 units, there was 115 applications to move into this development. And lastly, I do think this might come up in our conversation with our panelists. I just want to make sure everyone knows what we're talking about when we talk about accelerated dwelling units, or ADUs. They are secondary housing units on a single family residential lot that can create a wide range of housing options, whether an elder wants to live with near their families, or homeowners can make additional income. Just a lot of opportunity here with ADUs. All right, thank you so much for listening to this information I shared with you. I hope it was helpful, and I'm happy to hand it over to Michael to get our discussion going with our panelists.
Thanks, Kristen. So tonight we're joined by the folks that you see here on the screen, and that we'll be discussing really quickly. Again, everybody's bio and background is on the website, and I invite all of you to go there and learn more about what these folks are about. But just real quickly, Jane Gallery is founder and board president of Our Place. Jeff Head is your Village of Wilmette chair of the Housing Commission and with the Habitat Affordable Group. Richard Koenig is with HODC, where that project that that Christian just showed you. Maxine is the president of Area, who we introduced earlier. And John Nash is a Wilmette-based realtor with the Nash team. And John, as our realtor in town with the big picture, we're going to ask you our first question. And Kristen will ask you to stop sharing the screen so we can put the speakers up. With that, John would just ask you to maybe start us off by talking to us about, if you could sum up housing in Wilmette in 25 words or less, what would you say about it?
Well, our housing is mostly single family detached housing. They range in price about $300,000 to several million. the median being 900,000. There is also single-family attached condos and townhouses. Those range in price from 100,000 to about $1 million, and the median being 350,000. And we do have some rentals also. Those range from about 1,000 a month to 10,000 a month. So that's sort of an overview.
Okay, that's great. I think that was even closer to 25 words or less. So thanks for that. So again, part of the plan is to take a big picture look at housing and also to focus on issues. If we had to talk about what are the most significant housing related opportunities and challenges that are before Wilmette, Jeff, maybe we could get you to summarize that for us.
Thanks, Michael. I think the things that jump out at me from that analysis that Goodman Williams put together are the kind of two major points jump out at me. One, there's an emerging, if not already emerged, mismatch between the housing stock and the population as it changes and ages. The two numbers that really spoke to me on that were average household size of 2.8 and the average or the median number or the median unit design is 3 bedrooms and greater. And we saw trends towards an aging population. And so I think that what you're seeing in sort of the broadest strokes are seniors that are staying in the homes that they raise their children in, and those units being recycled at a fairly slow rate to families with children. And I think that in part we're seeing that one of the challenges is there's not an obvious place to go in Wilmette that is an easy alternative for somebody who maybe doesn't want to take care of their yard and fix the gutters and that sort of thing. Sort of maintenance-free type living, whether it's townhomes or multifamily elevator buildings. I think that anecdotally, and John might have some thoughts on this, but certainly anecdotally, the demand for the condominiums along the lakefront, notwithstanding their age, is I understand it to be very high, and that the turnovers are snapped up quickly. There are not a lot of vacancies in those condominiums. Anecdotally, we're hearing that the price points for the new Optima building that's being developed are going to be very high, which is a strong indicator of demand for that kind of housing. So I think that one of the things that we need to consider over time is how do we diversify the housing stock to accommodate an aging population, but also to accommodate an entry-level population. That those numbers, that the drop-off from high school, college graduates to the age 40, 45, very dramatic. And I think that it's indicative and probably intuitive to people that there's not a lot of opportunities for young families, couples, first children type of opportunities, which might show up more in the attached townhouse or duplex type of a scenario. And then I think lastly, I think the slide that showed the number of people who work in Wilmette relative to the number of people who could afford to live and work in Wilmette was striking. And I think that we need to reconcile that in some way. I don't think everybody who works in Wilmette wants to live in Wilmette, but I think that there are a lot of people who would like that opportunity. And I think there's some real benefits to a local economy to be able to provide that. I think and obviously there's environmental benefits as well, as finding ways to, shorten the commute and create more of a 24-hour healthy economic cycle within the workforce. So I'll stop with that and let others chime in.
Jeff and John, thank you both. That's a great kind of introductory overview of where we are and what we might need to think about. And Jeff, as you were speaking, one of the slides that jumped out at me is the one that talks about when housing was built in Wilmette. And folks in town will clearly understand there was a big chunk of it that was built before 1940 and way before that. And that a lot of it was built between the war and 1989 and 1969 rather. So that era when the vast majority of housing was built in Wilmette is not necessarily what people are building now. And it's great because it creates all the historic areas, but it speaks to that question of need that you raised. So maybe we'll turn to that. Let's turn a little bit about what kinds of housing, now that we're in a different market and almost a different world. Maybe we can get all of you to maybe opine a little bit on what other types of housing are needed in Wilmette. And Jane, let's get you to start with that because there's a very special area that you work with.
Well, I bet everybody, all of you know somebody with a disability who lives in Wilmette. For over 25 years, they've been included in our schools and in our park district programs. They support our restaurants, they volunteer in the community, they shop in our stores. And yet as adults, it's very difficult for them to stay in this community they love and where they've made their social connections and be able to live independently from their parents. So it would be so inspiring for Wilmette to come up with some solutions to help them stay in this community where they're contributing and have all their connections.
That's great. And that's a great point. We think now in terms of housing, in terms of a lot more people than we did perhaps a number of years ago. Maybe we could ask others on the panel to maybe talk a little bit about what they see as need. John, whether it's the kind of things that your clients ask you for, or Maxine, maybe it's something that you know generally in terms of the market that people are looking for now that's different than it was historically.
I'll say that I think all types of housing, there's a need for everything. We can't develop any more single family because that's all used up. So it's multifamily is what we have to focus on. And I totally agree that housing for disabled would be wonderful as a part of that development.
Great, thanks.
And I can jump in. So in addition, Kristen gave some very helpful numbers, and I'll try not to have too many numbers to provide here without any graphics, but it's one thing that's important to understand that there are some requirements that the state of Illinois has in terms of affordable housing for various communities throughout the state. And it's interesting that they every 5 years determine the number that they consider appropriate for each community in the state. And their last assessment of Wilmette was in 2018. It was based on 2016 data. And at that time, they assumed that there were about 431 units of affordable housing that were needed. And I think the more recent information that we estimated is that it's approximately 413 affordable units that are available that exist in the community that are affordable. So that's one thing to keep in mind, that the number that the state is viewing in terms of affordable housing is estimated out there. And also, one thing it's helpful to know that, as Kristen mentioned and other people mentioned as well, there are very few units that are affordable by people, especially who work in Wilmette. Between about 2011 and 2021, there were about 111 single-family homes for sale in Wilmette, and all those that were actually affordable, which means that they were priced at $146,000 or less, which is, again, the state's calculation of what is an affordable for sale unit. And most of those were single family detached homes, and very few of them were single family attached homes.
Great, thanks for that.
Maxine, I think I heard you say that there's approximately 400 odd units of affordable housing, and as well as a need for an additional number that was similar. Did I hear that right?
They're currently,
according to the state requirements?
The state calculates that there are currently 431 that meet the state's requirements. So, but the village has in the past calculated a different number of preferred number of units that are affordable based on needs for the community and needs for those 6,000 people who are working in the village, but not living in the village, and seniors and persons with disabilities who might also need affordable housing.
We'll talk a little bit more about affordable housing in a minute. I just want to remind everybody, if you have questions about housing in Wilmette, we're going to save time at the end of this part of the presentation for you all to ask this panel your questions. One of the things that is, and I mentioned the historic character of Wilmette and existing housing of all types. And so we do sometimes ask the question about how can we preserve the existing housing stock? How can we make sure that it's there for new families to move into? There was a number of years ago issues throughout the region about tear downs. And to the extent this housing is what one might call naturally affordable, how do we preserve that? Or do we? John, maybe we get you to start us off with that.
Yeah, my comment on that is that the houses that are torn down in Wilmette are actually not the most affordable ones. It's the $500,000 to $800,000 price range houses that are torn down, whereas there are detached homes between 300 and 500, and then all the multi-units properties, none of those are torn down. So just as far as assisting with affordable housing, focusing on the properties that are actually torn down, it wouldn't make a difference. It's not going to impact affordable housing because it's sort of the mid-range. The developers are looking for nicely located large lots, and those tend to be the mid-range prices.
That's a great observation. It's something that a lot of communities have dealt with.
Well, and preserving affordable housing, it really takes a concerted effort by the community to try and do that. It takes the political will and the will of the commission and the commissions and the residents to say, yeah, it's important to save some housing that's affordable for entry-level folks, for people who want to start out in the community, for people who have lower wage jobs that are making $20, $25 an hour. There's no way to get a starter home to be able to live in the community. 22 years ago, when the community was going through the same plan of updating the consolidated plan, they really looked at and said, oh, there's no possibility we can't build anymore. There's not going to be any more development in the next 20 years. What we have now is just going to stay exactly what it is. And as we've seen, things have changed a lot. And so it's important that the plan look ahead and say, well, things are going to continue to change for the next 20 years. And what type of community do we want to have? Is it important to try and preserve what's existing? Is it important to build new types of things we hadn't thought about, realizing things will change? We've seen it happen.
So Rich, let's get you to continue on that theme of about affordable housing and why it's important to communities. How do communities deal with it? And maybe talk a little bit about Wilmette's experience and your own experience and the success of Cleveland Place.
Right. Yeah, I think it's interesting to think about what we want to be as a community. That is it important to have a diverse population economically and all types of other means of diversity. And with the housing stock in Wilmette is fantastic. There are beautiful homes. There are so many wonderful places to live, and sort of think about what kind of community do you want to be in the future? Do we want to be inclusive? Do we want to have people that have a broader range of incomes available? Do we want to have people who work in the town, actually be able to live here and not have to be here during the day and then just go away at night and go someplace else? And think about how we complain about the highways being so full. What if people didn't have to drive? What if they lived in the community and they wouldn't have to get in front of us, get in our way when we're trying to drive somewhere? So there are lots of selfish reasons to want to try and have a more diverse community, just to create that additional option for people. When, as a nonprofit organization, we've been looking at ways throughout the northern suburbs to try and create affordable options, just to create new opportunities, new niches. We're not trying to change the community. We're not trying to get rid of the great housing stock that exists. But what if there were more options? What if people who made $15 or $20 an hour could afford to live in Wilmette and be able to walk to work or to have shorter commutes to work? People that we saw at the grocery store live next to us. People who work at other low wage jobs we see out in the world every day as we're going about our way. What if they could live near us in our communities and their kids could go to the same schools, and just what those opportunities were. When we worked on Cleveland Place, it was a really uphill battle for us because people weren't familiar with the term affordable housing. They had in their mind that it was slum housing, that it was low quality housing, that it served people that were undesirable who we didn't want as neighbors. And through that process of talking with our neighbors, we really hopefully have been able to share that it's people that are just like us. It's people that we know. It's people who go to school with our kids and who work in the areas that we shop at. And so our process of going through the community meetings, again, hopefully help educate people, but the process was long and painful for us as a developer. But in the end, we created housing that I hope people are proud of, that people can say, look, we've got affordable options for families. And the people who live there now are people who are associated with Wilmette. They're affiliated with Wilmette. There are people who we promised before that we were trying to reach out to people locally and give them the opportunity to stay in Wilmette, to live in Wilmette where they work, where their families are, where their connections are. And that's who lives there now. So that property that we have over at the former American Legion building at 1925 Wilmette Avenue, those rents are much, much less than, as John mentioned, the $1,000 a month. Those rents are $600 for a 1-bedroom, $800 for a 2-bedroom. But it takes a lot of money to make low-cost housing. It takes a lot of time and effort to make low-cost housing. And it takes that concerted effort from the community to say, yeah, this is important. This is something we want to try and strive for and include in future developments, include in future multifamily projects that go forward, as well as individual standalone projects. So it takes that effort and it takes a lot of money to be able to do that. And hopefully that's something we can build into the plan for the future.
That's great. Thanks for that. Thanks for that summary, Rich. Jeff?
Yeah, lower my hand here. I was just, one of the things I observe about Rich's development is another one of the nexuses that we need to think about as it relates to a diversity of housing types. And it's a zoning issue in a lot of cases. There's a lot of single family housing. Basically, the majority of the city or the village is zoned single family. And it might be that something that's considered by the board and the plan commission is, are there areas where maybe the zoning is changed to allow, you know, higher density, maybe not of the density that we're talking about on Green Bay Road or along Sheridan, but to allow, you know, a cluster of townhomes or, you know, duplexes or that sort of thing, where currently we have you know, post-war ranch or you know, smaller homes on big lots. And you know, that ability to get economies of scale for building homes creates opportunities for lower price points. And so I think there's a diversity of approaches that range from, I don't know if the right word is traditional affordable housing, but the kind of affordable housing that Rich develops with direct subsidies, to just different housing types being allowed in a manner that allows for, you know, a broader diversity of housing types. And this is really aims towards that big dip that happens from age 20 to 35 or 40, in being able to create some opportunities for first-time homeowners at a different price point.
And that's a great point, Jeff. The plan is going to talk. We're kind of using these terms almost interchangeably, but let's be clear, we're not. There's two things that we're talking about. We are talking about affordable housing, like Rich did, and at Cleveland Place, but we're also talking generally about housing affordability, right? And it's that diversity of housing types that adds to that affordability, not a subsidized form of affordable housing, but housing that's just more affordable. And I'm going to ask Maxine to talk about that a little bit. But just so everybody knows, it's kind of in the context of, I mentioned earlier, the sub areas that we're looking at in terms of the plan. We'll talk a little bit more about those in our next panel. But part of the plan is to take a look at Linden Square, the Village Center, Green Bay Road from both one end of the village to the other, and the same with Ridge Road, because these are areas that may see development pressure in the future, or where the market has changed. And these may include potential for redevelopment that would be related to multi-unit buildings, townhomes or apartments, condos, the sorts of things that Jeff was talking about. And Maxine, maybe we'll get you to talk a little bit about that type of housing and how that fits into the market, and maybe even how it fits into some of these sub areas, but at least to explain to everybody a little bit about the role that these different types of multi-unit buildings play in the market.
And that's a very important point, that these sub areas are true opportunity areas where the village can try to accommodate the housing growth that, especially in the somewhat optimistic scenario that the Chicago Metropolitan Area Planning Commission, CMAQ, has proposed of about 4,600 people by 2040, that translates into a sizable number of housing units. If you're using an average of 2.8 people per household, that translates into about 1,600 households and required housing units. If you're assuming that some of those people who will need housing in the future are smaller households who need 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units, and not the larger units that are typical in the single family housing stock, then it translates into probably 1,800 housing units. And that's a lot to accommodate in Wilmette, which hasn't seen that kind of housing growth in the last 10 years or so. And so there's some real opportunities in some of these major corridors to have housing that will appeal to a variety of different segments of the housing market, to seniors who are empty nesters and want to move out of their current single family homes into some other type of housing, thus freeing up their single family homes for other larger households, for persons with disabilities, because these buildings typically have elevators and physical accessibility that's easier, as well as people who are working in Wilmette, who may, especially if some of the units are more modestly priced and price point, that would accommodate people who typically, based on incomes of people whom we've looked at who are working in the village, cannot afford the $1 million or the $850,000 house, certainly. So all of these are opportunities that do exist in terms of providing some slightly higher density housing that can meet the village's need to increase the number of housing units in the next 20 to so years.
Great, thanks for that summary and that background, Maxine. Just a quick reminder for everybody that there's an opportunity in the Q&A box here to ask questions, and we did get one about affordability and affordable housing, and Jeff, maybe this is one for you. The question essentially is about who was it that really decided that there's an objective to be able to have more affordable housing and look for those folks to that Rich was talking about to be part of the housing mix within Wilmette. Jeff, maybe we get you to start, and Rich, maybe you can kind of add to that too.
Was the question who decided that was an objective?
Sure. It says to read, if Wilmette is 80% single family detached with a median of $164,000 of income, who decided that it's our objective to be able to house people making $40,000 a year?
The village board. I mean, I think,
and maybe you can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's been part of a ongoing discussion dating back in the 10 years that I've been in Wilmette, from you know the apartment building that went up at Wilmette Avenue, or at Green Bay and Wilmette Avenue, and subsequently with Rich Koenig's development and the Optima development. There's been talk about finding opportunities to create affordable housing on a more formal basis, so to speak, or a sustainable basis. I think that one of the things that you see in Wilmette is the majority of the housing that's affordable is probably a transitory affordability. It's older housing stock, whether it's apartments or single family. But the board and village president, both of the past two, have made it a focus of the board to find more opportunities for a diversity of incomes to live in the village, whether, again, as I suggested a minute ago, whether it's subsidized affordable, like the former Legion site that Rich Koenig developed, to just more finding opportunities for a diversity of housing stock that has a wider variety of price points.
So I mean, ultimately, it's a village policy decision that comes from the board, and the board recently rejuvenated or reinstated the housing commission that you're chair of to be a place to have that discussion. And this plan is a place to start that discussion, and the housing commission is going to continue it as time goes on. Is that fair to say, Jeff?
Yeah, that's fair to say. I guess the other thing I would flag too is, as Maxine was mentioning, there's a state requirement as well that municipalities consider, and consider, you know, the ability to provide to analyze and provide affordable housing within the municipalities. And so on the basis of the state requirements, there's also a deficit. I think that probably drove in part the thought process with the village board, setting affordability as a goal. I think one of the things that I, as the chair of the the Housing Commission is looking for forward to as part of this planning process is really learning, some of the things that have been talked about today in the presentation, and kind of where we have a mismatch in the overall housing stock, and what might be, what are the target numbers, and try to come up with a way to analyze it in a manner that could allow us to put a more specific housing plan forward that will be presented to the board and to the village for comment.
And Rich, there's another question that came in that I'm gonna ask you to tackle too as part of the answer to that. And it's sort of about amenities and the affordable housing aspect. But the question's an interesting one. It talks about at the end of March, Wilmette's only laundromat closed. So in terms of supporting affordable housing, particularly perhaps ADUs, how can Wilmette address the gap in terms of housing where there may be need for things like laundromats or laundry facilities or the amenities that go along with housing? How would you speak to that question?
Sure. I mean, I think housing is a more multifaceted issue than a lot of us realize. Wilmette needs expensive housing and has a lot of expensive housing. It also needs some moderate housing. And I think it would be denying the reality of who works here and who lives here to say that Wilmette doesn't need any affordable housing. So it's not an all or nothing. It's not that we want everybody to have lower incomes. It's that there should be a range. And the village board has suggested that that's a good idea, and communities that want to have diversity, that want to have their kids have access and to other kids who are different than them, that we want to have small businesses like the laundromats that are in town, that have been in town, the people who own those and who work there need to be able to live closer to their jobs. So it's about, I think it's having that additional units available by expanding the size of the pie. It's not a limited pie, and everything can't be totally expensive or become such a monolithic community, but to have that additional diversity, to have more housing in the middle, more housing at the lower end, creates that much more interesting, much more vibrant, I think, community than if it's just one type of stock.
Thanks, Rich. Jane, we got a couple of questions about living with disabilities, and I'll read one and summarize. Districts 39 and New Trier have been creating truly inclusive environments for individuals with disabilities. What can be done to ensure that young adults with disabilities can live and work in the community where they grew up, particularly assuming that's Wilmette? And Jay, maybe you can tell us a couple places that have done this well and some examples of how it's done.
Jane, you're on mute.
Jane, we got to unmute you. Hold on a second. Can you unmute yourself? There you go. Start again.
Yeah, there are limited opportunities in Wilmette, again, because of the cost of the real estate. So even state agencies that, state licensed agencies that provide CILAs, community integrated living arrangements, have a hard time locating in Wilmette. I've been involved with some other families in an innovative project where it's a private pay situation, and it's worked fabulously. I mean, one of the individuals has walked to his job before COVID. He was able to walk to his job in Panera. It's 2 blocks from our place. They can have a lot of daytime enrichment programs, and that could be a model. And that's what we hope. There are other families who are interested in doing that, but it's really about coming up with innovative solutions, like, just like Richard, like everybody's had to do to address these issues. The cost to a family with an adult child with a disability is the equivalent of a college education every year for the rest of that adult child's life. So when you add in the, a really expensive cost of real estate and the additional supports, it's a difficult issue to address.
Right, and an important one. Thank you. We got another question here, and we have time for 1 or 2 more if people want to add. But we got a question that I'll invite anybody to jump in here on because it's a tricky one. It says, "Can we convert the golf course into multi-unit buildings?" And I will start by saying the answer to "can we" is, well, yeah. But clearly, first of all, the golf course is a Park District property, so that's not a village owned piece of property. It's a Park District property. And if you've seen housing go up in golf courses in other places, that wouldn't surprise us because that's happened. So I guess anybody who wants to jump in on this one is welcome. But I would, simply kind of sum up here and say that yes, it's possible. There are other golf courses that have seen redevelopment as multifamily, multi-unit developments. Whether or not it happens is a question that each community looks at. And again, it's not a village property, the golf course. It's a Park District property. we're at about break time. Just to give everybody a heads up, I'm going to ask the panel if they have any final thoughts that they'd like to share on this topic. But first, I would like to thank each and every one of them for sharing their time and their insight and their wisdom with us tonight. And just with that, if any of the members of the panel would like to share another idea or something that came up that you didn't get a chance to share, briefly, now's the time. Rich?
I think it's interesting just to look around what other North Shore communities are doing around the issue of housing and creating affordability and having a terrific housing stock. Communities like Highland Park did this 20 years ago, required developers to include some affordable units in their overall developments over a certain size. Northbrook just recently passed an ordinance that requires developers to do that. Evanston has done that. So there are plenty of other examples out there. This isn't necessarily cutting edge to look at this and to think about it. It's definitely a topic that's worth considering. And whether you agree or disagree, there's plenty to be educated about. There's plenty of examples of how it can be done in really good ways and really constructive, creative ways that you keep the great quality housing stock you have, but also add to that, to add to the vibrancy of the communities. It's nice to see those examples out there.
I just want to thank the panel and Tesca for the Tesca and the team for some really interesting work, and look forward to continuing to work together as the plan starts to come together. And thank for all the folks who asked questions.
Thank you all. And I would just acknowledge the chat. If you'll see, there's a clarification to my response to the question about that. The question about the golf course was perhaps about Canal Shores rather than the Park District, which is a great clarification. And Kathy, I appreciate you sending that. And the answer is effectively the same. Can we is always a yes question. Do we want to is the other question. But it's an interesting one that maybe the plan can float. So if there's no other comments from the panel, what I would do is I would tell you that we're going to take 5 minutes to kind of readjust the technology and set ourselves up for our panel on commerce and the sub areas. I do want to just one more thank you to the panel for everything they've done here tonight. A very interesting discussion to incorporate into the plan and the effort that's going to go into that. So with that, take 5 minutes, refill your coffee, go make another pot of popcorn. We've got a whole other half to the event and we'll be back at 7:05. So thank you all very much.